We have back with us Henry Hill, Deputy Editor at Conservative Home. Afternoon to you, Henry.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us as ever. This Afghan, what they're calling a data leak, although as Stephen Allen, our previous guest, pointed out, it's not really a data leak. It's somebody who royally screwed up. It wasn't an accident. Somebody could have, put a password on something, and they didn't. But the story's not going away, and of course it's slightly developed today when we learn that 100 British special forces, that could, and also MI6 spies, senior officers, also named on this data leak as well.
What were they doing on the same spreadsheet? I mean, I know it's not probably the biggest concern when you're thinking about, when you're thinking about, oh my God, somebody leaked all this information and then we were blackmailed and everything else. That's all obviously much worse. But you just have to think the insight it gives you into how the state organizes itself and looks after sensitive data, that apparently there was just some big spreadsheet, presumably titled spies, collaborators, etc. With all these people on one thing. It's extreme. Do you reckon they were on different tabs? Do you reckon there was a tab for spies, a tab for special forces soldiers on the Excel? Who knows? It's baffling. It
does sound extraordinary that something that was clearly, and it wouldn't have taken a sort of an intelligence expert to know that what was on somebody's computer screen at that moment was sensitive. That would have surely been known. So you'd have been treating it with metaphoric oven gloves, with whatever you were doing with it, but somehow just got sent in an email without any kind of password protected detail on it, and of course sent to the wrong people as well. I mean, it beggars belief. And we're just talking about people losing their jobs for what would be deemed in the grander scale of life as minor offences. Apparently the person responsible for this was just moved to other duties, Henry.
I mean, it's one of the great dilemmas of dealing with this kind of problem, because there is a completely coherent chain of thought which is called black box thinking. You might have heard of it. It's from the airline industry.
Yes, indeed. Which is effectively, Matthew Said wrote a really good book on it as well.
Yeah, and the idea of it is, in the airline industry, one of the ways that they've got accidents down as much as they have is because they adopt a zero blame approach, provided you're honest. And so essentially the idea is, look, what we really need to know is why this plane crashed. If you were tired or whatever, you need to tell us so we can fix it. And that's perfectly coherent. On the other hand, that really does imply that you are being really forensic about what went wrong, learning lessons and applying improvements. And that's not necessarily the case in government. And it leads to the fact that what we see is no consequences, because the consequences of this person's massive mistake are the expenditure of what? £7 billion at present of public money, the bringing over here of thousands of people, if not more, potentially another £1 billion the MOD has set out for compensation payments to these people, and then any crimes and misdemeanors any of these people perpetrate when they get here. The idea that that person has not lost their job is absolutely extraordinary.
It is literally beyond. I'm slightly speechless. Even it's beyond belief. And the MOD put out this very kind of very nicely worded email saying, that the person responsible has been put on to other duties, and you just think, wow, if you don't lose your job for that, I mean, what the heck do you lose your job for? But this is what we're dealing with, and of course the story seems to be compounding, because as you rightly say, Henry, we haven't just got people in danger, whether they're Afghans or whether they're British personnel, as we just mentioned, spies and intelligence officers, SAS, whatever. You're also dealing with the fact that there's a £1 billion lawsuit swirling around, so it's going to be very expensive in two ways. Tens of thousands of people coming to the UK who require accommodation, and £1 billion in lawsuits, and that's just the starting point.
I mean, if you think back to the start of this parliament, Rachel Reeves was bandying around a figure of 20 billion black hole. She likes to talk about it a lot. Now, at the time, it seemed to those of us looking at it that this seemed a little bit specious, couldn't really work out where the 20 billion was coming from. Well, I mean, this is 8 billion, right? Yeah. All of the tax rises, all the broken promises, all the spending cuts that this government has justified on the basis of having a 20 billion black hole, this is half of it. It's a vast, vast amount of money. Especially when you think 8 billion versus, even if it was 10,000 people, right? What's 8 billion? I mean, I don't know, I speak to that off the top of my head, but the level of public spending per head, anyone in Britain would dream of receiving anything like that much government money spent on them and their interests.
100%.
It's almost as if the whole system is sort of conspiring to discredit itself.
Yeah.
Right? When you have people saying we need to leave the ECHR, and that's a live debate now. Well, now you have people suggesting that the ECHR might force us to pay another billion in compensation and to take even more people from Afghanistan. It's really some of these lawyers and civil servants, if they want to maintain the status quo, they're really not going about it in the right way.
Correct. Let's move to this story, Henry. This one's just broken via Guido. Reform claims that Yousef or his staff accidentally liked an anti-Semitic tweet against Robert Jenrick. So Zia Yousef, who used to be the chairman, of course, now in charge of Doge, I think they're calling it, under fire after liking a tweet which called Robert Jenrick a traitorous zogbot with a Jewish wife and family who imported brown savages. Yousef said a team member accidentally liked the awfully anti-Semitic post, which he called racist against both Jews and himself. Clearly it was not intentional, he added, blaming spiralling racism on the platform. The tweet, by the way, has since been unliked by Zia Yousef. Look, it can happen. Most famously, of course, there's the Labour MP who liked to tweet reference grooming gangs. It is possible you can go through your Twitter page and end up liking something and think, oh, God, I shouldn't have done that. But it's also a terrible look. Bearing in mind, by the way, that Mr Yousef has been incredibly critical of Robert Jenrick.
Yes. You clearly, I do think we can probably safely assume that this was a member of his staff, given the racism directed towards Mr. Yousef himself. Nonetheless, it's baffling and worrying, I think, for a couple of reasons. One, I do think, yeah, obviously accidents happen, but this isn't a tweet where you read it through the first time and it seems fine, yes, and then you reread it and you're like, oh my God, that's what he actually meant. This is just a pure, unadulterated, really surface level, I hate everyone. Yeah. But two, the question is, you can only really like something if it comes up on your feed, right? For people who aren't familiar with Twitter, you have to follow people and either you get their tweets or you get tweets retweeted by people that you follow. So that means that this kind of racism and anti-Semitism is who either tweet this themselves or who like it, and that is deeply worrying.
Oh, it certainly is. And we seem to be in a position where, obviously, many of the crimes we talk about now are sort of social media based. Your history as well, we've been discussing on the programme as well, Henry. But in the world of politics, much like we were just discussing how anyone who works at the MOD is in charge of a database that's got clear, demonstrable sensitivities attached to it should be super diligent. You'd think that would just go with the territory. You'd employ the most diligent person on the planet for that job. And similarly, if you work in a politician's office and you're looking after their social media, you might think you would be super diligent as well in that role.
Yeah, it's literally what you're employed to do, right? Yeah. I think this is the thing. If you're employed as a communications manager to run someone's social media, they are literally hiring you so that they have a full-time pair of eyes on their public image. Yeah. So actually, if Yousef genuinely ran his account himself, given that he's an incredibly busy man with an incredibly stressful job, I think this would be more defensible in a way. I'd be like, okay, look, I clearly don't think that Zia Yousef thinks of himself as a brown savage. He clearly doesn't think this was a slip of the finger. The fact that it was a professional in his office staffed with doing this full time is more damning. And again, questions are, who loses, when do people, lose their jobs?
Yeah. He's now put this tweet up. It says, and I quote, "One of the team who post on my X account accidentally pressed like on an awful anti-Semitic tweet earlier today. I apologise for this. The post also refers to brown savages and is equally racist against me. Clearly it was not intentional. The amount of anti-Semitism and racism on this platform is spiralling out of control, and I hope that changes soon." So he's cleared it up, I guess. So that's the end of that, Henry, and I hope it is, but I also hope that people are a bit more diligent when they work specifically. You literally had one job to check this stuff. And I want to mention this story. Diane Abbott suspended from Labour after doubling down on racism comments. This, of course, was her talking to the BBC, saying it's silly to compare racism faced by black people with that faced by Jews and travellers. I've got a curious defence of Diane Abbott on this, Henry. I think the manifestation of racism against anyone is the same in terms of the hatred and how it feels and all the rest of it. But I think I know what she was trying to say. And even if what she said was bonkers, should she lose her job for it? We're asking that of John Turode today. Let's ask the same question of Diane Abbott. What do you think, Henry?
So, I mean, John Turode was singing a song. You can think it was unwise, but I think firing someone over that is ridiculous.
Yep.
Diane Abbott is a politician making a political point, and ultimately, from setting aside our individual judgments of what she said, it is up for political parties to decide what points they're happy to have inside and outside the tent. I think the interesting thing is, do you remember when this first broke? After I think it was an article in the Guardian, and she said that it was she didn't mean it. It was a first draft, and that
yes, a first draft. That's exactly what she said. Yeah.
But now it turns out she does believe it after all.
Yes.
And it is it's a distinction, sure. Would somebody who is visibly black, for example, face the same immediate racism as somebody who was maybe not immediately of a minority? No. But I think it's really, in many ways, it's not a particularly important distinction, especially with regards to anti-Semitism, because, of course, especially if you're a racist who hates Jews,
100%.
There are lots of Jews who look like Jews, right? Yeah. And we have had the Metropolitan Police moving Jews and Jewish counter-protesters on because they are worried that if one of these big Gaza marches comes past, they will be targeted. And I think if you look at the history of anti-Semitism, the idea that racists can't single Jews out in the street is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
and have done on many, and Jews who can't wear anything, they can't wear Star of David on them, they can't wear anything on their head, anything carried a Torah under their arm, anything like that. So you're absolutely bang on in that respect. I just wonder whether Diane Abbott, who is kind of the gift that keeps on giving in terms of crimes of idiocy, is just sort of best ignored more than anything else.
From Starmer's perspective, that's probably true. Look, both the big parties usually end up with a handful of MPs from 1,000 years ago who maybe they would rather probably not select today. The challenge for Starmer, of course, is that he's now in this real bind because having lost a major platform of his legislation just a week or two ago, he's now got to decide, well, I need to crack down and impose discipline on this very undisciplined party.
Yep.
Can he afford to have Diane Abbott free to mouth off when he's withdrawing the whip from other people? On the other hand, she's very popular. And will his MPs wear this level of crackdown? I don't know.
Listen, Henry, on that point, thank you as ever, Henry Hill. Have a great weekend, Henry, Deputy Editor at Conservative Home.